the 18th of February 2025. Can I welcome you all here? First item on the agenda is apologies.
Yeah, Chair, we've received apologies from the leader, Councillor James Gibson-Watt, Councillor David Selby, Councillor Karina Kenyon-Wade, Councillor Elwyn, and we've also received apologies from Diane Reynolds, officer.
Thank you, Kath. Item 2, declarations of interest. I'm sure you'll make me aware as we go through if there are any. And then item 3 is observation and recommendations made to Cabinet on the 31st of January. That's to do with the budget. Any particular issues in that, or they're there for noting? And David,
yeah, just a minor point, a minor amendment, Chair, on page 5, where it's referring to sickness. I was actually referring to some of the figures I'd seen in the service self-assessments and comparing those with past experience on my own part. And I didn't say below that in many other organisations. I said they appeared to be on a par with many other organisations. Only a minor point, but it is a little bit misleading.
Okay, sorry, which paragraph? Page? Oh, it's
page 5, where it says sickness.
Yeah,
okay. The levels of sickness in Powys was below, it should be, was on a par with that of many other organisations in Wales. Okay,
we can. Have those observations gone off to full council? Are they published in the papers already? Or can you make the amendments, please?
Yeah, yes, Chair, make an amendment.
Okay. Thank you, David. No other comments on the observations from the last meeting. And included the recommendations to Cabinet of those 4 recommendations as well. So we'll move on to the next item 4, which is the third quarter 3 of the outturn of the revenue account as forecasted for the end of this financial year. David, would you like to give us a high-level introduction?
Yes, Chair. I'll just give you a very sort of brief high-level introduction to the report. I'll take it that obviously you've all read the report. So this is the financial forecast for the year ending the 31st of March 2025, as at the 31st of December 2024. Table 1 of the report summarises the projected full-year outturn position across the council services, including the HRA and the school's delegated budget, and reports an underspend of £0.9 million against the budget. This is an improvement of £3.8 million from quarter 2 due to the actions taken in response to the forecast at quarter 2. The change in the forecast position is due to a number of factors, including additional funding from Welsh Government, the transfers from specific reserves to manage the adult social care overspend position, and other changes made within social care to stabilise their budget position in 24-25. And the changes are set out in table 2. And at 2.4, you can actually see a lot of more detail around the social care improvements. At 2.6, we point out that Appendix A provides the forecast financial position for each service, including the cost reductions not yet delivered but assured, any planned movements to or from reserves, and the use of risk budget agreed to date. Further detail for each service is provided in Appendix B, where heads of service set out their individual narrative, including activities being undertaken to deliver the agreed cost reductions, the pressures facing the service, and what they're doing to manage their budget and to mitigate any shortfalls. Section 3 looks at the agreed cost reductions. So the net cost reductions of £10.7 million were approved as part of the council's budget for 24-25. In addition to that, there was some mothballing of children's services in-house residential schemes of £0.5 million, plus there were undelivered savings from previous years totalling £1.7 million, which were rolled forward. So that gave a total of £12.9 million of cost reductions. Table 3 has a summary which shows that 52%, £6.7 million of the agreed cost reductions have been delivered by the end of the third quarter. A further 24.9% or £3.2 million assured of delivery by services within the 24-25 financial year. 23.1%, £3 million, are described as unachieved and are at risk of delivery in this year. Services, as usual, are being challenged as to the reasons for the changes in positions for some savings proposals and will be required to consider mitigating action to ensure that they can deliver within the budget allocated. With regard to reserves, the reserves position is set out in Table 4. At the beginning of the current financial year, £73.2 million of revenue reserves were held, with the general fund reserve at £10 million. The equivalent of 4.1% of the net revenue budget for 24-25, excluding schools' delegated budgets and the HRA. The Council Reserves policy requires the general fund reserve to be maintained at a minimum of 4% of net revenue budget. In addition to this, there are a limited number of specific reserves and each have a clear intended purpose. 4.3 points out that schools set their budgets in May with an expected call on reserves of £3.3 million. This figure is reduced to £1.5 million as schools have provided updated forecasts and recovery plans following work with a team around the school and finance surgeries. The budgets have also received additional grant funding as set out in the report at Appendix C, which will also have impacted on the forecast outturn position. Section 5 lists environments and grants that have been received, and Table 5 in particular points to pay and pension related grants which were received from Welsh Government. Section 5.2 lists environments that require Cabinet approval, and Section 5.3 is environment that's going to require full council approval. Section 6 relates to financial risks, which I'm sure you've all read, so I won't go through those in any detail, and the resource implications as outlined by our 151 officer are listed at Section 7. And that concludes the report, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David, for that quick summary. I know Council is consumed by the budget debate this week, but the impact of current year's revenue expenditure has a severe impact on the following year's expenditure. So it's important that we don't take our eye off the ball here. So thank you for the third quarter figures here. Jane or Anne, would you want to make a couple of comments at this stage or not? Anne's picture's gone off. Jane, would you like to?
I can do, Chair. Just, I mean, this position and seeing the improvement that's reported since Q2 is really pleasing to see. And I think, as highlighted in my comment, the biggest change has been as a result of additional funding coming through from Welsh Government. So although it's an improved position, you know, we have to be cautious, don't we, in terms of understanding the reasons for that, and not taking our eye off the ball in terms of the rest of the financial year. And you are absolutely correct in that the pressures that we see falling this year do have that impact on next year. And we have considered that as we've worked up the budget that's being considered by Council on Thursday. So yes, it's great to see the improvement, and it shows that our monitoring systems are in place and work effectively, but also that we can respond when needed to help mitigate that position, but also being mindful that that has in the part been contributed to additional funding coming through.
Thank you very much. Yes, so the 5.6 million additional funding has led to an improvement of 3.8 million of the overall picture. How much of that 5.5 million was expected? A lot of it's around pay.
Everything to do with the pension. So the teacher's pension we were expecting. We'd had an indication that that would be coming through. Yeah. So that's a big part of it, 2.4 million, together with the firefighters' pension element. The teachers' pay and the NJC pay, both of those elements were not expected totally. I think there was some sort of indication there might be a consideration for teachers' pay, but I don't think we were expecting the NJC pay to come along as well. And what's even more pleasing as a result of this is, of course, that funding has been baselined into the settlement for the new financial year, and obviously we've now factored that into the budget plan, so that did go some way to help bridge the gap and provide us with support in terms of that balanced budget for next year.
Yeah, that made a big difference. Questions, panel? Pete, Councillor Pete Lewington.
Yep, thanks, Chair. Yeah, just a couple if I may. Some of them's just my own understanding, really. On the table 1, where we are sort of projecting the 0.9 million underspend, if that is achieved, what happens to that? Does that reduce the council tax, or does that just go to reserves? And the second point, if I may, is the 3 million of unachieved savings in table 3. I assume there's no complacency on that, and we are still striving to achieve them. And then I guess B is it's back to something I've touched on previously. Is that around a bad budget setting in the first place when those savings were agreed and they weren't really realistic? And I guess off the back of that, once we get the reasons why they can't be achieved, will that come back to this finance panel to look at and review? Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Pete. David, would you like to respond to that?
With regard to the savings, obviously, when we set the budget, we assess the savings that are put forward by services, and we look for assurances that they are deliverable. But obviously, we're into a third quarter here. There have obviously been impacts, as we're very pertinent to the actual Q2 outturn. So we have to accept that as the year progresses, there are going to be different impacts that are going to mean that some of these savings might not be deliverable as they were first assessed to be. That said, as the report states quite clearly, where the services are saying they can't deliver those savings, then they're tasked with actually looking at alternatives to ensure that they can balance their budgets at the year end.
Okay, thank you, David. Yeah, almost a quarter of the proposed savings, it's 23.1%, have not been achieved. How much of that almost £3 million is accounted for in the next year's budget? Has some been sort of accepted that it won't be delivered, and that's created pressure on the next year's budget, or how much of that has been accounted for? All of it, all the 2.9, or some of it?
Well, we won't know exactly what the savings position is going to be until the year end. But as I said, if they've already identified savings that they're not going to be able to deliver, then we'd expect them to find those savings somewhere else within the service.
Jane, sorry.
I was just going to say that obviously, if at the year end there are undelivered savings, there's a potential that they might have to be rolled over into next year, as they have done in previous years.
Yes. Yeah. No, we got the budget papers for next year, haven't we? How much is it of that? 2.9 is down there as unachievable savings within the next financial year. Sorry, Jane, you've got your hand up.
I'm going to get Anne to check the exact figure for me while I'm responding, but we do, services are challenged on those savings, as Councillor David has already set out, where they are still considered to be achievable, albeit there's been a delay, then they will stay within those service budgets for that delivery in the next financial year. And I think we have, what we do then is, if savings for whatever reason, and of course that needs to be specified and we need to be clear and challenge the reasons around non-delivery, where there is no longer the understanding that those can be delivered, then we do consider writing those savings out as part of the next year's budget plan. That ensures that we've got a robust budget plan going forward. And we have done that to a degree for next financial year. And I'm hoping Anne will have that figure available now to be able to tell us exactly what it was.
I do, yes. So for the delay, Jane. Yes, we've got Next year's savings, undelivered savings that we're going to write off through the budget process is 713,000, and that's across 2 services, education and HTR.
And what, you don't have to split there between the two or not? So
Yeah, education 390,000, HTR 323,000.
yeah, and no, if I knew my budget papers backwards, I would have been able to quote those for you myself. But, apologies. Thanks, Anne. And Pete's the point around the just under £1 million potential surplus within the. Did you deal with that, Jane? I can't remember now.
Shall I pick up that, Councillor Alid? Yes, in terms of the outturn position, the forecast position, as always, if you look back in the previous years, we tend to assess where the greatest need will be, trying to work out would put into a capital financing reserve, will there be need in the general reserve, or any of the other specific reserves that we have, and we'll set out the rationale for that decision as we head towards year end and know the size of that, of the a final position.
Okay, thanks. Pete, did you want to come back on that at all?
I just I guess one small point, please, Chair, without trying to labour it too much, was I suppose if I put it simply, say like 12 months ago, if I'm head of service, I've agreed the savings I can get. I understand both Councillor David's points and the officer's points there. I guess what I was trying to drive at is, do we as a panel get to see the reasoning why they weren't achieved, and that we're happy, if you like, with the reasoning and the learning points, so as we're happy with the budgeting process for next time? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm sure David will come back on that, but
Yeah,
at the end of Q4 we look at those unachieved.
yeah, that's the very point I was going to make, Chair. Thank you. Just to say that at Q4, obviously, you will have a complete summary coming from services, and I'm sure that'll include any reasons for non-delivery.
Okay, thank you.
Non-delivery at this stage is slightly worse than previous years, but not that much worse. It tends to be around 80%, doesn't it, or just lower 80s? But Chris.
Yeah, well, it's nice to have some positive news for a change on there, so that's welcomed. On the, I just wondered whether from some of these savings that we're seeing coming through, are any of them geared up around the sustainable powers agenda? Because the way that we have been delivering services and going forward, that has to change. And I just wondered whether there was any evidence base being shown that any of those changes are now on a much more sustainable basis, so that we can have the assurance going forward into next year, where we know we're going to have additional pressures coming through on there. So we'll stick with that for now. Thank you.
There are savings included in the budget proposals for next year. There were some in the budget proposals that were included for this year that are directly attributable to work streams within the Sustainable Powers programme. We are intending to hold a briefing for governance and audit. I'm sure that it's quite possible, Chair, if you discussed it with the Chair of Governance and Audit, that you could make that a joint session where we will be giving a high-level briefing of what's been achieved so far within Sustainable Powers. And I think some of the information I've seen, it's quite impressive, actually, what we have achieved so far.
Thank you, David. Maybe a note to Kath, just to remind me about that meeting near the time. Any other comment, just what do you think about it? Just a quick comment on social services improvements. There's considerably, there's been quite a bit of release of reserves to cover some of the additional pressure. How much of that big shift, 3.2 million in adults and 1.5 in children's, is down to changes of management or different decision making within the services to try and claw back some of that overspend? I don't think Sian Cox is here as perhaps Sandra would want to comment on the children's. Oh, and I can see Nina there as well. Sandra and Nina, please dive in. Nina.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Nina Davis, Director of Social Services and Wellbeing. In terms of adult social care, as you can see, there's quite a change in, and of course, just to remind you, these are forecast positions. So for Q2 was a forecast position, not an overspend position. There has been a significant change now for Q3. As you rightly say, Chair, some of that is agreed call down on reserves and the risk budget, which went through full council, as you recall. So specific reserves called down, I think, was 948,000, and then the risk budget for adult social care was 626,000. The rest of the change in the forecast position, we've got a new care management system, which is going to be procured. That's looking like it's going to be not require as much funding as we anticipated. So that's been a change in Q3, which has been part of that. We've also had a return of some funds from non-delivery of a supported living contract as well. So I think that was about just over £250,000. We've also had a small amount of one-off Welsh Government funding of 116,000, and the rest is the change in kind of the service changes that we've done. So making sure that we're doing all that we can to right size strength-based packages that are the right size for people, etc. So the work that the service has done and the mitigation that the service has put in place. So it's a real mix, Councillor Aled, of a lot of different work and mitigations and changes in funding being received into the service. Does that answer your question?
Yes, no, thank you. So roughly half and half, wasn't it?
Yes, yes.
Size-wise. Just the, there was a £250,000 return from a social supported living provider. They were given the money for doing something, so something hasn't been done. What is the impact on the Powys residents or clients of the service? Perhaps I shouldn't be asking this, and we should pass it over to the scrutiny committee who've got responsibility for that. But is it important to understand the impact on residents?
Yeah, it was a credit note for non-delivery. So I couldn't go into the detail of that here today, Councillor Aled, but I'm happy to bring that back if required, or as you said, perhaps one for discussion at Health and Care Scrutiny. Yeah,
perhaps a note for them just to take that on board and see the impact on the service users. So it's important to bear that in mind. Brilliant. Thanks, Nina. Any other comments on the revenue budget before we move on to the capital budget? No? Good. Thank you all, and I guess we'll see when does the last quarter come out. It tends to be a little bit slower, doesn't it, at the year end, because there's more work to do. When would that be? Roughly mid-June, David?
I think it would be around that time. I don't know if Anne could confirm.
Mary's got it.
Yeah, I think the draft would be available around mid-June. It'd probably come to finance panel towards the end of June or beginning of July.
Okay. Look forward to seeing that.
The timings, yeah.
Diolch, Mary. Yeah. Next item on the agenda is the capital item 5, the capital forecast for the same third quarter. David, again, would you like to high-level overview?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a very high-level summary again of the capital forecast for 24-25 as at 31st of December 2024. The 24-25 capital programme was approved by Council on the 26th of February. It included capital schemes total £102.5 million, of which £37.57 million related to the housing revenue account. The revised programme at the 31st of December 2024 is budgeted at £86.44 million, following the successful award of additional grants and the reprofiling of budgets between financial years. Actual spend amounts to £46.86 million, representing 54% of the total budget, and a breakdown by service can be seen at Table 1. Currently 29%, £24.12 million of the capital expenditure is budgeted to be financed by borrowing, and the interest cost for this is charged to the revenue account. Table 2 actually shows the capital programme funding. Table 3 lists the grants received in highways, regeneration, community wellbeing, education and digital services. Section 4 refers to the reprofiling of budgets across the financial years. And section 5 actually gives details of 2 environments. With regard to capital receipts at section 6, £0.6 million has been received to date, including £0.28 million received for the housing revenue account. There are currently sales agreed to the value of £0.8 million. These are at the legal stage of the process and will generate future capital receipts. There are £5.66 million of assets that are in the process of being sold. However, it's highly unlikely that these will be sold before the end of the financial year. It will not be possible to achieve our annual target of £10 million in capital receipts this financial year due to sales falling through and delays with other sales. And section 7 outlines the resource implications. Chair, thank you. I don't know if one of the officers would like to add to that.
Jane, is James in? Oh, James is in the meeting as well. James Chappell.
I don't have anything to add. Sorry, Chair.
Okay, no problem at all. Thanks, James. I've got a little bit. I've got to go now. It's a little bit urgent situation. That's problems with living on a farm. So apologies. Any other questions around the capital programme? I do note the receipts are well short of the targets. What has gone wrong this year? David, I think it's less than the, sorry, I can find the right place again. Less than the £1 million, 0.6.
Yeah, I'm just getting the figures. 0.6 million achieved, and there are sales agreed to 0.8, so that's 1.4 million and a half. Obviously, the £10 million is a target, and it's a target because we do feel that the more we can achieve in capital receipts will take significant pressure off our borrowing costs and the charges that are actually impacting our revenue budgets. It's disappointing we haven't received, we haven't got a lot closer to our target this year, but as stated in the reports, there's £5.66 million of assets that are in the process of being sold, but they won't impact this year.
But there's another £10 million target the following year as well.
Perhaps we'd achieve 15 million next year. Who knows? Unlikely, but as I say, the important thing is it's a target. Yeah, and we do fully understand the benefits of achieving that target, and we're working towards that.
Yeah, the difference between achieving the target and not achieving the target is £600,000 to the revenue budget, or well, depends on what rate you're going to put on it. Matt.
Yeah, just picking up on Councillor Davis' point, and I do apologise. The team are, trying their best to try and get as close to this as possible. We're obviously dictated by market forces as well. So when we put properties up, we are dependent on obviously buyers coming forward. But I don't want to make excuses. It's something that the team and myself will pursue and try and exceed. But yeah, just want to give you that assurance that we are, trying to maximise it as best as possible.
No, I appreciate that, Matt. It's politically sensitive areas sometimes, isn't it? So and it's not always easily achieved. Any questions on the capital programme? Are you just general question? Are you satisfied where we are with the spend at the moment, David, or will there be quite a bit of rollover at the end of the financial year?
I'm satisfied where it is at the moment. I dare say, looking at the figures we've got in front of us, that there will be some rollover. Yes.
Okay.
James has got his hand up. Perhaps he could add more detail to that.
Thanks, James. And James, as well, can you also answer what's the size of the capital program for the next year? I was about to open the paper, but budget papers out, but I got sidetracked. So on the spending this year and what the capital program is for next year. Thanks, James.
Yeah, so the spend is annually is somewhere between sort of 60 and 70 million. As you can see, the budget there is still sort of 86. The economy and climate line is the one that stands out in table 1. That's the Montgomery levelling up scheme there, and we have, since this report, had approval to continue that scheme into the following year. So we've not been able to reprofile until we've had that there. So that will take sort of, I don't know, 15 million or so out of the budget into next year to continue that. As for the budget for next year, sorry, I was trying to get that up while I was talking and that didn't work. It's substantially less than the 100 million that we started with this year. I'm thinking it's more. I'll just give me a second, and when files open, I'll get the figure up. But I think we're starting from a more hopefully realistic point with things going on.
Okay.
Is it 86.8, James? I've got some figure here. I don't know.
Yeah, I believe it's in the 80s.
So with a little bit of additional money not spent this year, going forward to next year, it won't be far off the same sort of level of capital expenditure, I'm guessing.
No, I'd expect us to be somewhere between 60 and 70 million by the end of this year.
Okay.
Next year's budget is 65 million for the general fund and at 29 for the
Okay. As I said, I got a bit of
a little bit.
Councillor.
Oh, hang on, sorry, those aren't the correct figures. Sorry, I'll take them out and bring them up.
Okay, thanks, James. Councillor Peat, apologies for this, but can you carry on this meeting? No, please. Are you still here, Pete?
I'm literally, apologies for this as well, Chair. I'm literally just going. I've got a very ill animal that I've got to get over to the vets. So I'm just trying to track the animal down to get across to the vet. So I do apologise. Okay,
no problem at all. We are more or less at the end of the meeting now, aren't we? We've got the panel. Sorry, any more questions on the capital forecast for Q3? No. Panel recommendations to Cabinet. Any recommendations flowing out of today's meeting? I can't see any hands up, but it's just monitoring and looking forward to seeing what the Q4 delivers end of year. So, and we can have there's probably be more recommendations around that at that stage when we look at the undelivered savings. So thank you for that. And then item 7 is a forward work programme. It's hard to see beyond the budget, as I said now, but we've got 3 meetings highlighted there in the next couple of months. Right, thank you, members. Short and sharp today. Any other questions, please email me and we'll get in touch with the head of finance, and we'll try and take them offline if there's any queries on these papers. So thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr pawb. And we'll call end to the meeting there. Diolch.